I want to talk about what I call the instrumental conception of rationality. And I want to look at the implications of that for the notion of what is an organization, and also for the notion of trust. That before I start with those three things, first the instrumental conception, then organization, then trust, I'd like to start with some preliminary comments. I had the good fortune to participate back in the 90s in a regional development plan in Colombia, which was organized in a participatory way. And all sorts of NGOs and businesses and local authorities and quite a mix of people were involved in trying to shape the policies for this department, or I guess it's a state really, region of Colombia. And then later with the GHFP, we worked with a project which I really like in Indonesia, where this group works with villagers who live by the side of the rivers in central Kalimantan, and help them, the local villagers, to articulate their needs, and then as were to prepare them to take those demands and those needs to the local municipal councils up the river into the city. And then they work with the municipal councils to, as we're prepared, help prepare them to listen to these demands from different communities in the neighborhood. And that was kind of like to see that in action has been quite inspirational. And we thought, okay, well, let's try to have a sort of special meeting in Kalimantan about governance basically. And so what we did was we were lucky enough to bring together different sectors of the society. And I mean, fundamentally what we did was we got them to they discussed the problems of the region. And then we had presentations from other local councils and other institutions within Indonesia, which have tried completely different innovative approaches. And then instead of saying, okay, well, you know, let's not discuss the problems anymore, we said, let us discuss, like, how would you like Central Kalimantan as a province to be in 50 years time, in 60 years time? Like, what are you working towards? And it was really interesting to sense how the room just changed. It was like just changed completely, because before we'd been tackling and thinking about problems, and then suddenly it was really open. Everybody was willing to share, to cooperate. It was a really different feeling. So both of those experiences in Colombia and Indonesia gave me, as well, a sense of the contingency of our present arrangements, the fact that it can be really quite different, doesn't have to be as it is. So that's my first preliminary comment. Well, the second one is kind of a bit of a pitch for philosophy, because, I mean, as you know, most of the concepts which we are talking about are to do with evaluative concerns, like what's good, what's better, what does better and good mean in these contexts. And obviously, that kind of conceptual reflection has to take place in relationship to existing practices, and thinking sort of very systematically about, okay, why is that better than this? What is the relevant principle? What are the relevant values concerned? And trying to isolate in a way that what's important here is like what's valuable, what's good in a least derivative way. In other words, trying to get to what is basically behind that. So that means that in philosophy, we tend to, when people think in this way systematically, tend to arrive at kind of quite idealized and quite abstract conversations. But I think that can be really important, particularly when we're talking about changing narratives and changing values and inventing new language. So my favorite saying is, what's the use of running when we're on the wrong road? And I mean, for that reason, as you'll see, hopefully it'll emerge in a minute, I'm a little bit skeptical about the notions of governance, the notions of leadership, and the notions of social capital. Even the notion of economy, actually. So now I move to the second bit, which is to finish the preliminaries. I want to talk about the instrumental conception of rationality. And what that really is about is the relationship between our activities and our goals. So normally we think like this, right? We think, oh, the activity is a means to a goal. And so as well, it's the goal that has value, and the activity is just instrumentally valuable to that goal. And so as well, what's really important there is the goal and not the activity. The activity has a kind of derivative value. And indeed, then we, as we apply the idea, okay, well, actually, what's important about that is efficiency. So we have to be more efficient in the way we achieve our goals. So that's a really common conception of rationality. And I've called it the instrumental conception of rationality because it instrumentalizes. And what I want to, I mean, clearly that conception of rationality is behind most academic disciplines related to economic rationality and decision procedures and game theory and so on. So, well, it takes a little bit of thought to see that this instrumental conception of rationality is at best incomplete, actually worse than that. It's got things the wrong way around. And because it's so pervasive in our society, it's kind of difficult to see it, actually. So, I mean, the reason why it's got things the wrong way around is something like this, right? It's like, what's the value of money? Well, money is only valuable because of the things you can buy with it in the end. So we buy things, but then what are the value of those things? Well, the value of those things has to relate somehow to the activities of human beings, of what people do with those things, together or singly, right? Like we listen to the radio and so on and so forth. But as were the activities and experiences and processes that we live through, which as were, those constitute our lives. So actually that's really, as well, that's in a sense like, that's the, like, in a sense, the end point, right? It's the value of people's lives. What does that consist in? And of course, that is really trying to understand that, I think, is really what well-being studies is about. So we've got this, as well, series of dependencies there, value dependencies. And instrumental rationality just gets that the wrong way around because it puts the goal before the activity. It says, the activity is only valuable in relationship to the goal. All right, so so basically what instrumental, I mean, there are two errors here, which are kind of twins. The first one is we commodify, instrumentalize, objectify, reify us, ourselves and other people and our relationships between people. We turn them into things. And the other way around is we turn things into as if they had value or a life of their own, such as we treat money as if it was a thing in itself that had value, a non-derivative value. And we treat organizations in that way. So there are kind of two mistakes, which are, as we're ways of getting the value relationships the wrong way around. Thinking about this then allows us to sort of to see a little bit kind of a quick glimpse of what kind of the alternatives are. So, I mean, the first thing is that, you know, what's going on here is the fundamental relationship between the activity and the goal. And we can try to kind of reverse that and think, okay, yeah, actually, the one importance that goals have is that they make activities better. They make activities more enjoyable and more challenging and fun. So in other words, you know, it's one thing to run in a race, it's another thing just to run. Sometimes in some contexts, running in a race because you've got a goal makes the activity better. So by having goals, we make the activities better. So in other words, we don't, as we're run to win, but as we win to run for the sake of the running. And the second thing is, of course, is that when we achieve goals in this society, in our society, that means we get the reward of doing more activities. Right? So in other words, a company which is constructing buildings, right? What I'm suggesting is we can turn the relationships on their head, right? The process of construction is, as well, should be valuable in itself, and the actual physical concrete building, that if it turns out well, as well, allows other people and allows the company itself to do more construction and other activities. So in other words, yeah, we should be focused that the value is really in the activities. And then the second lesson that we can draw from this is something like this. People and our lives and our relationships matter in a way which is entirely different from the value that goods and money and other commodities have. It's not a question that people matter more, because that puts them on the same level. I mean, you know, it's more like that sort of saying, you know, instead of saying let the people eat cake, let the people eat special drawing rights. There's a fundamental mistake in that saying, let the people eat special drawing rights. Okay, so I've tried to give a brief indication of what the instrumental conception of rationality is. And now I want to say something about what that means very broadly for the nature of an organization. So the first thing is that, excuse me. Well, clearly we don't want an organization to be thought of as akin to a person. Organizations have derivative interests. They do have interests, but they're always derivative. And so that means that when we work for an organization, it's really tempting and difficult for people to avoid thinking of the interests of the organization as something that has non-derivative value. And indeed, I mean, a little bit of reflection about political parties, we see that the interests of the political parties as well subvert actually the goals of the party. So organizations, when they treat their own interests as non-derivative, actually are committing that second error of reifying themselves. Secondly, that means that when we're thinking about what the goals of an organization should be and how to conceive that, we need to think about that in terms of the well-being of persons, that is, the kinds of activities that make up a person's life and their relationships with each other. Thirdly, it's really common in organizations within a capitalist framework to just instrumentalize work and to think of work as achievement of results. But actually, the redesign of any organization has to involve the idea that work is something that's non-instrumentally valuable in and of itself. It's a way of being together. It's a way of doing things together. It's something which is valuable in itself. People spend 1/3 of their lives, or 1/6 of their lives, I should say, 1/3 of their working lives at work, sometimes a lot more. So that should be something which is intrinsically valuable and which is designed in a way so that people can actually appreciate that value. And fourthly, as as we said, the organizations need to take decisions, but if the decision making is not going to be such that it instrumentalizes other people, then it needs to be democratic. And that means that there needs to be, as well, institutional spaces for serious listening. So in brief conclusion to that second part, third part about organizations, I just wanted to say that, yeah, in a sense, the meaning of our work in organizations isn't as well the results that we produce, but it's the way that we co-construct ourselves as beings who, as well, have well-being and who, as well, get along with each other well. So that leads me to the last part, which is about trust. And I'll have to keep this really short. I mean, the thing that really surprises me looking over the philosophical literature about trust is how much of it actually instrumentalizes people, how much of it is about delegation of roles and delegation of tasks. And you'll see that in the piece that I put up on the website. So I was trying to think about, well, how do we conceive of trust in a way that doesn't fall into that instrumentalizing trap? It's really important that we don't treat the word trust as an absolute thing. Trust has to be relative to a set of descriptions. Clearly, I will trust the snake to bite me. I will trust my children to leave the kitchen untidy, or trust myself to leave the kitchen untidy. So trust has to be relative to a set of descriptions. So what are the set of descriptions that are relevant in this case? And I would say that the descriptions pertain to building human relationships, which means that trust has to be the trust that others will treat one as a person, and the trust that one will treat the other as a person. And I try to explore that a little bit in the paper. Thank you very much.